Doug, friend, you're a hard act to follow, as always. He always does give great talks like this. So thanks. And so to set the mood for a calmer, no. It's Thankful Thursday, so thanks for the organizers, and thanks for KITP for this, as my friend Michelle Luge says, research paradise, right? And then I have a lot of collaborators to thank because my background is in really simple granular flows, and I get exciting stuff like road beds and alluvial fans, but only because people, like a lot of the people here, are really generous in sharing ideas and bringing things up. So I'm going to talk about granular mud. So, granular mud in the context of debris flows, and take a little side step at some point in to look at road beds where we got a lot of our intuition. And is it just like pressing this? So I think I can't figure this out. So, all right. So we're going to. There we go. Okay, so we're going to, for our first quick look, we're going to just go to Taiwan and sort of zoom in. This is where I met Pascal and Franco, where we saw some interesting debris flow evidence. And we're zooming in, and we're zooming in on the spot right here. You can see a little scar in the landscape. Okay. Yeah, there's a river going down here. And that's the Laonong River Valley, incredibly sediment filled, and it's an incredibly special place because the uplift is so fast, and it's a place with a lot of sedimentary deposit. So we see this really dramatic sort of set of landslides that's happened since a big typhoon hit this area in about 2000. And here's the Putampunas fan. And this is kind of a more mild plan across the way on Laonong River. And you'll see here's Laonong River, here's, and here's Ishui debris flow. And you see a tiny little fan here. And I'm focusing kind of my goals of this talk on these fans. And that's why I'm sort of focusing on this little fan. And here, this is an incredibly hard place to do any sort of infrastructure innovations. They want to get to some remote villages, so they build this bridge, and they have to build this multi-million-dollar bridge along the side of this Laonong River Valley that's aggrading a lot and degrading a lot depending on the rainfall of the time period. So this one crosses the much less active Ishui channel there that leads to the fan. And again, this is meandering, and it changes so much. It's a fascinating meandering river just in and of itself. And here we're looking closer and closer. And you might remember Franco and this big bridge. You can see a couple people for scale here. We're looking at this from the Putampunas fan for this. Actually, I think we were down below it and taking this picture. But here's that Putampunas fan. We're looking across to this yellow highway here. And then what happens? Well, it wasn't even a typhoon, but there was a lot of rain from a post-typhoon rainfall in August of 2021, actually just before Chiao visited me. I should thank him, and I do in the next slide, for these amazing movies and photographs. So you see, this is a debris flow that's coming down from this place that wasn't active. Here's that bridge that is several meters above the ground. And you can see these big boulders going across. It's a little grainy. This guy in the car who's filming it is a little nervous. He's moving somewhere else now. And the bridge was gone. And so they have to do a lot of work as a government area to do this. So this is this topic of this different sort of debris flow mud than Doug talked about is sort of an ongoing work to understand this. But we want to understand the parameters responsible for these unpredictable hazards. And so sort of similar motivations to Doug, a little bit different setting. And our primary focus involves a different sort of problem. And so now this is the scene that we've seen a lot in Switzerland of the Ilgraben flow and alluvial fan. And you'll notice this like sort of narrow place where the debris flows are directed. And it's really out of a lot of hard work that they direct the debris flows that way, and constant maintenance of debris flow hazards. Over a long period of time, the debris flows had traveled over a lot of different parts of the fan. And these are numbers that, numbering that Challing de Haas and Alex Densmore and some others did of this fan, where the numbers represent, the smaller the number, the older the deposit. So there's a deposit here, and there's a deposit here, and then there was a rock fall around 3,000 years ago, and they can tell by dating that this is earlier. And here's that channel. It's not occupied, the debris flows have not occupied this region of the fan until really, really recently. So it travels around, and when we don't have really good infrastructure, we make a mistake, we have a problem where we build things. And this has been the source of investigation. Challing has really led the way on trying to understand what makes this debris flow move suddenly in some cases and not in other cases. And his idea, and a lot of the community idea, is that what happens is the debris flow will travel along a channel for a while, and then suddenly you won't have as much debris flow. And so you'll have some backstepping, like maybe not enough debris flow, so it stops here. The next debris flow cannot make it there. And so it plugs, and it blocks the channel. Okay? And so, and he shows that, well, the next flow through a bunch of mapping of fans all over the world, it's really remarkable work, that it's really, the flows go to a sort of a lower slope when they encounter a big blockage that they can't overcome. Okay, so that's really interesting to me, but I have this underlying rheology question. And I want to know under what conditions does a debris flow keep on flowing? When does it deposit or plug up another channel? And when does it keep on eroding from the same channel? That's kind of my underlying question. And, you know, all the rheology that we're doing is really on the scale of these muds when we're talking about big boulders, of course, right? And all of it's really important. So we came back to nearby where we are now. It's about 2 hours around the corner, around the Sierra Nevadas, to the White Mountains in California. And we're curious about two fans that actually seem to have a different erosion pattern, seem to have a different avulsion pattern. And they're pretty nearby. And I'm going to leave out discussion. I know the title involved discussion of weather. We're trying to leave out the question of climate by studying a couple of nearby fans that seem very different. Straight fan, about 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers across. Paiute fan, 4 kilometers away roughly, about 2 kilometers across as well. And they have, I don't know if you can see from there, but they have a really different pattern of channels. This one's riddled with channels. This one has a few very deep channels. Seems like they've avulsed at different frequencies. Here are some pictures from each of them with some helpful people there for scale. My son, a few years ago. And we're looking at, gosh, not only are the channelization different, and by the way, those interested in segregation, the segregation property is very different. But the grain size distribution is different. This channel has, and in fact the whole fan has a lot more boulders and actually a lot fewer fines, a lot less of the stuff that Doug was talking about. This one has many fewer boulders, very deep, you can again see the people for scale, very deep channels and a lot of fines. Okay, so we took a few samples. We also did a little research and looked at, this is a little clearer, the analysis that we did here shows the variability of the slope at different heights. This shows that the two areas are actually sourced from different materials. Straight is mostly granodiorite, I can't pronounce it, but especially when I'm nervous. But the straight is much harder rock is the main point. Paiute is much more sort of crumbly, it has a lower strength. And so we thought, gosh, I wonder if there's something to that, and then the contribution of the fines. And so we were curious about what about the material properties, like the grain size distribution, might influence this. And then, after all, what about Doug's material carries those big boulders? I think these are still open questions. So we want to sort of start to investigate this.
Using a model framework.
Oh my gosh. This is something from leftover stuff, sorry. I thought that I had deleted all of that. Oh my goodness. So that, so what I'm trying to say with this, I'm going to get rid of the practice recording here, is that we did a DEM simulation, believe it or not, to try to understand this a little bit. And you've seen many of these before. And what, and here's the little picture again of what we're trying to. And when I say again, it's a picture that you've seen yesterday from the lovely talks from the rheology, where we're pushing on the edge of this, and we're shearing this, and we're trying to look at what is going on inside and changing the fluid and interstices, and I'll say something about the simulations in a minute. So one of the things that is a point that I'm trying to raise with these simulations is not only the shear rate, and this is a little funny, but it looks funny because we put tracers in, and we have a periodic boundary in this direction and also out of the wall. And so we just see the amount of shearing going on. And what we're seeing here is the type of, when we have a constant pressure and we shear it, I guess, faster, we have not only more shear stress, but, you know, in parallel to the direction of shear, but we also have a lot more normal stress. And so we have a lower solid fraction, and the wall's pushing out. Could this be what is making the boulders float? Okay, so that was interesting to us. So here's a little bit of detail of the simulation if you want to know about it, but the main thing here is that we are modeling the fluid only with a little bit of lubrication force, and the details are there, and then our contact force is linking us to the particle properties. Okay, so quick curves to show we are doing the same analysis with these simulations. We look at the I that Doug mentioned again, that I like to think of as a ratio of stresses, the collisional stress or the bagnal stress divided by the normal stress. J is the viscous stress divided by the normal stress. Most recently, Trolson et al. Proposed that you could put an additive dimensional stress, and we saw the talks yesterday where we saw the justification for this, sort of the coefficient where we can put this together. And our simulations show this, and I'm partly showing our simulation because I'm going to do a little bit of weird stuff in a second, and I want to make sure that you believe our simulations at least a little bit. So for actually understanding the simulations, we also thought a lot about the tangential viscosity, but we also thought about the normal viscosity. So we're calculating both. They show these similar relationships. And what we want to see is we have this hypothesis that the rheology of granular mud is responsible for aspects of debris flow rheology. So we want to look at debris flows. At the time that we prepared some of this stuff and started building our intuition, we had roadbed material money. So we did some collaboration on asphalt materials and gained a lot of insight. So
the first one is with asphalt mixtures.
Oh my goodness. That's so embarrassing. Let's see. So the main thing about this is that, well, asphalt is a bunch of rocks and some sort of granular mud in the middle. The asphalt binder that's holding it together is like a bunch of particles and a viscous fluid. Okay? And the importance of like trying to decide what to use in the mixture is just to make the asphalt last as long as possible. And the test in the lab that we can use to understand some of the macroscopic material is just like the simple sort of shearing, pushing apparatus. And we want to run the same simulations as that and change some of the parameters to answer some questions for our local roadbed agencies. Okay? And so what are those properties? Okay, so maybe we think for a minute, how are those similar or different from debris flows? Okay, so we have coarse particles, which are between 10 millimeters and 2.5 millimeters, you know, a little bit smaller than debris flows. And then we have what the asphalt people or the roadbed people call fine particles, which are a little bit maybe coarser than geologists do, but in any case, when I'm saying fine particles, that's what I mean. And the people that I was working with, the folks at U of M, had found out sort of by accident that if you add graphene nanoplatelets, you can compact the mixture much more efficiently. Okay, so we have really two problems in an asphalt roadbed. One is that we want it to last a long time. Another is that we use a lot of energy compacting it. But otherwise, it's as stinky as it is, it's kind of a green material because we can use a lot of stuff in it. So in any case, the group that I was working with was trying to make a faster, sort of empirically a faster mixture. And they wanted to know why the graphene nanoplatelets would make it compact a little bit more quickly. So you can think a little bit, what does it do to the whole mixture to have more fines in it? Okay, so here's our again the apparatus that we're doing. But here's sort of the results of the experiments. Okay, so you might think now, what did you think for just a second that the GMP did to the whole systems? Well, it turns out, I mean, these are really GMP are pretty small, so it's modifying the binder. As we increase the GMP, you're increasing the viscosity of the binder, and we show this is higher compaction, so less air, less distance between the particles, gyration number, just time. And so as we increase the GMP, well, first of all, as we increase time, the system just gets more compact. As we increase GMP, it gets compact faster. Graphene nanoplatelets. Yeah, graphene nanoplatelets. I mean, okay, so it turns out that these aren't the tiny little things that are so popular to study. These are the sort of bigger things that you can get huge rolls of really cheaply. Okay.
So it's basically soot, right? I mean, this is large scale, right? I mean, you
Sure.
cannot make controlled graphene nanoplates. So it's
Yeah.
basically some type of soot that they put in. Okay.
Sure. Yep. Okay. So we put it in there, and I want to say something else. The granular mud in the asphalt business is called fine aggregate mixture, FAM. So FAM plus GMP. So now we go back to our little model and say, how do we do this? Well, I'm going to kind of use the granular physics that we've been hearing about in a sort of hokey way. I'm going to take the results for the mu-ijk rheology and stick it between the particles. So we go back to the little DEM simulations, and now I'm putting the normal and tangential viscosities into the contact model. Okay, and then tracking all the particles and getting the relative the velocities between the particles to get the shear rate and things like that. Okay, so what happens? Well, it just reproduces very well. Well, I mean, this is really well. It looks like there's a gap here, but we are really happy. The lines are simulations just to distinguish them for the model. It follows very well. When all we do is in our simulations for the mu-ij rheology, we just change that one parameter. We don't do too much fancy with the rest of the stuff, but we change that viscosity and we get it to work well. And you might be thinking, why didn't you just try changing the viscosity? Okay, so we tried changing the viscosity, and it was Tong, who's now at Westlake University, who's a PhD student. He said, that doesn't work, Kimberly. And so here's these simulations with just changing the viscosity. Okay, so I think we need the normal stress from the granular rheology. Okay, and so we were emboldened to investigate experimentally, essentially in the same way, what happens when we change our granular mud by changing the viscosity. So we investigated, we set up this, I was going to joke by saying simple experiment. It's a like really sensitive experiment with a big basin, and then a channel represents the most of the debris flow details that we've been seeing in movies. But here's the fan, and we mix up the stuff between the particles. Then we put it with a sand into a funnel that mixes it around. There are chopsticks glued in this funnel, so it's still in preliminary stages, and it goes down the channel all mixed. And here are a few different systems from changing from 4% to 8% clay. Okay, it looks, hopefully you're saying the same thing that I am, that it looks more channelized. When we increase the clay, seems like the avulsions are fewer and the clay smooths the surface. It's hard to get some quantitative results from just looking at those or counting channels or something like this. So we basically see the height complexity analysis. I should say, I'm seeing that I'm out of time, but I'm just going to show you, we do some height contour complexity analysis. Essentially, we look at the different height contours, we square those divided by the area that they contain, and then we see the different complexities. And the less clay, the more bumpy the surface. This is a quantitative value for it. The more clay, the less bumpy the surface. And then back in our field analysis, here is the straight one with less, with a bit more, less fines, with a bigger boulders, smaller channels. And this is more fines, Paiute, more clay, fewer channels. Okay, so just the conclusion slide. Well, the question slide. Is the multi-scale model for hot asphalt mixtures appropriate to use for debris flows? Is it appropriate for debris flow erosion deposition? There are modelers that are much better than I am in the audience. I'm an experimentalist by training. I would love to talk to you about what you're thinking about this. Geologists that are more geologists than I am, Doug and others. And really, I think that this is like this spontaneous erosion is very interesting to me. How do we capture that, and can we do that with this sort of framework? So thanks for your attention, and thanks again to the organizers.
Okay. Thanks for this nice debris flow and asphalt talk. I have a question, comment. On the beginning of your talk, you were wondering about how come some debris flow remain in a channel and others not.
Yes.
A bit surprised that you didn't mention, debris flow are well known for their levees. They made levees. This is, by the way, one way we distinguish in the field afterwards a debris flow from ordinary bedrock flow. And so, do you think that okay, the rheological parameters of a debris flow are important for the current flow, but it is well known that levees, the characteristics of levees, are linked to rheological parameters. And so, the history of rheological parameters, which can be different from one debris flow to the other, in the same catchment, as you may know, is also important. Have you any comments on these levees?
Okay. So in some ways, there are a few things here, but I think the main question is that when I was questioning, like, why does one debris flow leave its channel sooner, or deposit sooner, or erode sooner, and another debris flow not do that as much? And you said, is it related to the levees, maybe? Is all the rheology that we're talking about also related to the levees, and could it be a part of that? I think that, yes, for sure. For sure, yeah, so the levees, part of what goes on with the levees is you can see at the front of the flow that you get stuff tossed out and sort of piled up along the side.
And they remain afterwards. And
it remains afterwards. And so the debris flow that sort of overtops its levees has to be either big enough that that the levees can no longer, the levee plus the channel can no longer contain it. And so in some ways it's a competing thing here, right? It's the flow behavior of the debris flow that's associated with and then it's how big are the levees left behind. And the only thing that I can say with this, and I'm sorry that I forgot to take this off before then, but the only thing that we found so far is just the limited work that we did in Owens Valley. And in Owens Valley, what we saw was that the levees and also the segregation that we saw from the previous levees was distinct. It was a lot more, there were a lot more boulders in the levees, and there were a lot more, there was a lot more segregation in the levees of the straight creek than the Paiute. And so I can't answer that. It's a long thing, but I think it's a great question. I don't see any evidence that the debris flows like carve through or erode the levees. I see more that it overtops and goes somewhere else. But as far as how tall they are, I think it's a great question. I didn't see anything in the other people working on this problem as well. So I think it's a good direction to pursue.
Okay.
Okay. Kimberly, I'd like to thank you for this very intriguing concept of the multi-scale model. And
Thank you.
because let me think that maybe we can really couple a Eulerian continuum model for fine sediment along with DEN for course. I always want to do that, but don't know how to do it. And you give me a very good incentive to do that. Thank you. But my question is, have you, maybe you don't know, maybe you know, when you add a mu-I rheology as the contact closure, additional contact closure in the DEN model, how much computational effort is added to it, or is it just negligible? Essentially, you know, is it more time consuming?
It's more because the way that we do it, but I couldn't say how more at this point. Yeah, I can look back into our records and say how more. But that's exactly, it's a question that's raised in other situations too, like in gravel bed rivers where you have also a very bimodal system there. What do you do with the sand and gravel? It's such different scale. So it really motivated us to first see that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Yes, I have a question about the last experiments you showed at increasing clay contents.
Did you say elastic turbulence?
No, the last experiments you showed.
My last experiments.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's just these masks, you know. I mean.
I know my French accent is terrible.
You can't. Can't live with them. You can't. You can't talk with them.
At increasing clay content.
The experiments.
Yeah, the
okay,
experiments.
thank you. Sorry.
Can the clay act as a kind of lubricant between the large particles?
Well, that's kind of that's the idea. Depending on what you mean by the lubricant. Do you mean the lubricant is making it more slippery, or do you think the lubricant is acting, you know, to increase that lubrication sort of?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, due to the shape of the clay particles, if they are between the large particles, maybe they can act as contribute to reduce the friction between the large particles. This is what I mean.
Well, in fact, like if they're increasing that normal stress, they're acting to lubricate it. I mean, what you're saying, I think, is similar to what my asphalt materials expert colleague was talking about. That can we somehow modify the friction between the particles?
Yeah.
Rather than, but you know, there's all this fluid there, you know, and I mean, and so I think it might be both, but it might be that, you know, another way to look at it is the fact that it's clay important for its clay properties, or is it more important that you have something in there that's granular?
Okay.
And I think that is how I would ask that question. I think it's still, we're doing, what I didn't have time to do is talk about all the little scale experiments we're doing, sort of changing out the clay with silt. And so I think that would be the case.